at Regarden Magical Academy, a prestigious school known for favoring students with exceptional magical talent. The narrator reflects on the nature of the school and whether those without talent can succeed there. The protagonist, Will, is introduced as he enters a dungeon to fight a monster. He vows to prove that even talentless people can progress by slaying dungeon beasts. Will attends class alongside his familiar Kiki, where his teacher, Professor Edward, asks him to perform a fire spell on a piece of bulka ore. Will fails to cast the spell, and his classmates mock him. Cyan, a fellow student, performs the spell effortlessly from his seat. Edward reprimands Cyan for not following the rules and emphasizes that magic supremacy is absolute. He states that those without magical abilities are unfit for Regarden. After class, Cyan and his friends, Lyral and Gordon, continue to bully Will for his poor performance. Colette, another classmate, intervenes and scolds Cyan for bullying Will. Cyan argues that Will should abandon his dreams of becoming a skilled mage, especially a Magia Vander, as hard work and kindness won't be enough to achieve such a title. Will, Colette and Kiki walk through the academy, discussing the treatment Will receives and Colette's disdain for Edward and Cyan. Will assures Colette that he's okay and appreciates her standing up for him. As the conversation shifts to the world's origins, Will explains the history of the Magia Vander title. He describes the celestial host, invaders who once terrorized the world, and how 5 powerful wizards sealed the sky to protect it. The strongest wizards who achieve the Magia Vander title are those who thwart such threats. Colette then brings up the Ice Maiden's wand and wonders if Elfaria, a legendary figure, is watching over them. A brief scene shows Elfaria gazing out a window, confirming that she is indeed observing them. In a flashback, a younger Will and Elfaria discuss their shared dream of witnessing a beautiful sunset together. Elfaria suggests they both strive to become Magia Vanders to make this dream a reality. Will reflects on Elfaria's early achievement of the title due to her extraordinary magical talent. Despite lacking her abilities, Will promises to fulfill their shared dream one day. Later, Will apologizes to Professor Werkner for entering a dangerous dungeon. However, Werkner commends him for bringing back a specimen of an evil guard monster, awarding him 2 credits. Werkner advises Will that to rise through the ranks like the other Magia Vanders, he must improve his magical skills, including spellwork and writing. Werkner doubts Will can earn spellwork credits due to his inability to perform magic and suggests focusing on his academics instead of becoming a Magia Vander. Noticing Will's concerns, Werkner informs him of a Baskerville monster causing trouble on the dungeon's 6th floor. No one has yet defeated it, and Will thanks Werkner for the tip. Cyan, overhearing their conversation, heads to the 6th floor dungeon with his own group to deal with the Baskerville. The scene shifts to both Will and Cyan's groups, exploring the dungeon's 6th floor. Cyan reflects on how people like Will should not aspire to be Magia Vanders or attend Regarden. When a sentinel monster attacks one of Cyan's friends, Will hears the scream and rushes to the scene. Surprised by the appearance of the sentinel, Will realizes that defeating it will earn him 10 credits. He also sees Cyan in danger and debates whether he should help him, considering their past conflicts. Will dons a pair of goggles, given to him by Elfaria, and attacks the sentinel with his sword. Meanwhile, Professor Edward informs Werkner that Cyan has gone to the dungeon's 6th floor without permission. Werkner reassures Edward, knowing that Will is also there. Using a crystal ball, Werkner shows Edward how Will is holding his own against the sentinel. Edward and Cyan are both shocked by Will's strength and effort. Werkner reveals that Will is a mage with extraordinary strength, a strong physical build, and exceptional observational skills. He explains that Will is capable of striking an enemy with a sword blow faster than lightning. In the end, Will returns to Werkner's office and is awarded 10 credit points. Then move to a flashback from 5 years ago, where Will is criticized by his classmates for lacking magical abilities. At that moment, Will goes with Werkner to the headmistress of the Regarden Magic Academy, Kaldon. She presents him with a sword and uses several spells to attack him. Will manages to break Kaldon's magical shields, which impresses her. Kaldon tells Will that she will allow him to continue studying at the academy, adding that if he keeps improving, he might have a chance to climb the tower and achieve his and Elvaria's dream. In the present, Will attends a class at the Regarden Academy, where Werkner explains the concept of ascending the tower, saying it refers to moving to the higher institute. Werkner emphasizes that anyone who succeeds in ascending will have a chance to become a Magia Vander. He explains that there are 2 ways to achieve this, either by creating a new kind of magic, or by collecting 7,200 credit points from Regarden Academy. After the lesson, Will goes for a walk with Colette. Will discusses his experience with Werkner, and Colette tells him that he has earned many points in script writing. As they talk, they encounter Sion and his companions, such as Gordon and Laryl. Laryl tells the others that Sion defeated the evil Sentinel alone, but deep down, Sion knows that Will was the one who did it, making him angry. Later, Edward confronts Kaldon, demanding that Will be expelled from the academy. Kaldon refuses, affirming that Will is in his final year at Regarden. Edward argues that Will shouldn't be there because he isn't a real mage. Kaldon responds that she believes Will, even if he doesn't become a Magia Vander, has skills that could make him a healer or a magical mechanic. She also adds that she wants to graduate skilled students like Will for the Day of Destiny. Kaldon agrees to Edward's proposal to give Will a test. If Will fails the test, Kaldon will allow Edward to expel or promote him. Edward agrees and leaves. Afterward, Colette helps Will store his books in his locker, and Will thanks her for her constant help with her magical skills. Then shift to the study hall at Regarden Academy, where Will reads about world history and takes notes. Colette suggests that Will take a break, but he refuses, as he doesn't want to lose his writing skills or credit points. As they discuss, Edward appears and asks Will to head to the spell chamber immediately. There, Edward tells Will that he will give him a supplementary lesson to test his abilities. He says that Will must succeed in attacking him, and if he does, Edward will award him 5 magical points. But if he fails, he will be expelled. Meanwhile, Werkner arrives at Kaldon's office, where she uses a spell to watch what's happening in the duel between Edward and Will. Werkner is surprised that Kaldon allowed this challenge. Kaldon explains that Edward was the closest to becoming a Magia Vander in the past, so she understands his concerns. The fight between Edward and Will becomes more challenging, with Will struggling to keep up with any of the attacks. He feels the need for his sword. At that moment, Colette reaches Will's locker with Kiki, opens it using a spell, and sends the sword to Will. Will continues the fight against Edward and tells the audience about an ancient battle between a mage and an army of dwarves, where one dwarf managed to injure the mage and defeat everyone. Finally, Will succeeds in attacking Edward, and Edward grants him 5 magical points. Then switch to Kaldon, who expresses her admiration for Will's accomplishments. In the final scene, we see Rusty bringing food for Will at the academy, wondering when Will will return home. Transition to a flashback, where Elvaria tells Will that he is brave and kind-hearted. She then gifts him the goggles he wears in the present. Will promises her that they will watch the sunset together in the future, and Elvaria is excited about it. Afterward, she heads to the tower, and Will cries. Werkner appears and promises Will that this will be the last time he sheds tears. In the present, Will is delivering newspapers to houses. While doing his job, he trips and drops the stack of papers. As he picks them up, he reads an article about Elvaria's achievements in developing magic. Will discovers that the Upper Institute has issued a new decree, and he is shocked to find out that Elvaria is behind the decision. This makes him want to return to his dorm. Will asks Rusty to craft him a magical tool because he wants to join the mission to collect Frost Walker ice cores, a task assigned to students where participants will receive rewards. Will receives the magical tool and Rusty wishes him good luck. Will heads to the 4th floor of the dungeon, where he notices many students, including Sion, defeating the Frost Walker creatures. In the meantime, Will spots large penguin-like monsters scaring a girl, and he steps in to save her. The girl introduces herself as Iris. We then switch to Verkner giving a lecture on magic. Rose, one of the students, asks Verkner if he believes Elvaria is a talented mage. Verkner responds that she is remarkable, possibly the best. Rose taunts Colette, assuming she's jealous of Will's attention toward Elvaria, which makes Colette snap at her. However, Colette realizes deep down that Will is exploring the 4th floor of the dungeon because he wants to see Elvaria again. Returning to Will and Iris, they continue exploring the 4th floor. Iris tells Will that she wants to become useful to the Magia Vander and aspires to one day touch the real sky. Will explains to her that the current sky is a massive barrier created by immense magic to protect the world, and that the fall of this barrier would lead to the catastrophe. Iris then admits that she met Elvaria in the past, who saved her from monsters, inspiring her to pursue her goals. Will and Iris continue their exploration, and Will senses a strong Frostwalker creature ahead. He tells her that, despite his lack of magical talent, he has a lot of experience and research skills. They enter the area and discover a massive creature called Frost Rex. Iris mentions that this creature is incredibly strong and worth 6 credits. Will remembers that physical attacks won't work on the creature due to its abilities. Will reveals Rusty's magical tools and tells Iris that he can defeat the Frost Rex. Using his physical prowess, Rusty's tools, and a spell, Will manages to take down the monster. Iris is surprised by Will's performance, but reacts strangely, implying she may be hiding something as she contemplates whether to report his success to an unknown entity. Afterward, Will shows Iris a collection of ice cores he gathered from the creature and suggests they return to the group to deliver the cores to those who requested them. Iris agrees. Later, Iris wanders through the Mercedes Colas Tower and meets several members of the Magia Vander, including Carrot, Zeo, and Eleanor, with Elvaria also present. Eleanor expresses concern about not having enough warriors to face the Day of Fate, fearing history might repeat itself. Zeo asks Iris if she has found someone who could help prevent this day, and Iris recommends recruiting Will. While some debate his abilities, Carrot suggests waiting until the Grand Magic Festival to make a final decision. The scene ends with Elvaria summoning a crystal and uttering Will's name with a smile. The events shift to Sion, Colette, and a group of students participating in a magical exam to earn credits, with Will also joining but struggling to keep up with the others. During the exam, 3 standout students, Lehana, Wignall, and Julius, achieve success and earn credits. Julius challenges Wignall and Lehana, hoping to one day compete with them, and they leave, eager for that future. Later, Julius and his friends run into Will and mock him, with one of them mentioning the upcoming Grand Magic Festival, which brings back memories of the festival for Will. Later, Colette meets Will in the cafeteria and tells him that he needs someone to recognize his talent at the festival. She explains to Will what the Grand Magic Festival is, and talks about the 4 Tower factions and their connection to the Magia Vander. If one of these factions chooses Will, he will be closer to achieving his goals. She also mentions the presence of observers who can give students extra chances to reach the tower. Will understands, but explains why he doesn't want to follow Colette's suggestion. They then head to the lockers, where Colette senses something unusual. Upon investigation, she discovers a soundproof and magic-suppressing barrier in the area. Colette uses Kiki magic to break the barrier, revealing a hidden staircase leading to an underground location where they find a group of students gambling on who will win the Grand Magic Festival. Will and Colette meet Simon and discuss other students like Lehana and Wignall. Before Will leaves the class, Colette stops him and asks to go with him to the dungeon, but he tells her that he will be working at Gina's tavern that night. The scene shifts to Will working at the tavern, serving drinks to dwarf customers. One of the customers discusses the Grand Magic Festival with Will, who replies that he might not participate. Gina advises him to stay focused like Rusty, who also works at the tavern. Later, Will and Rusty discuss Will's wages, and Rusty suggests that Will find a new job, but Will admits that he enjoys talking with the dwarf customers. Julius and his friends arrive at the tavern and start insulting the environment and the dwarf patrons. Julius demands food and drinks for himself and his friends. Will explains to the audience the status of dwarves in this world, noting that any confrontation between the dwarves and the mages would make things worse for their race. Will confronts Julius and his group, asking them to apologize, but they refuse. Will takes down Julius's companions, and Julius uses ice magic to intimidate Will. Before attacking, Julius notices Will's resolve, which causes him to back off and leave in peace. Julius orders Will to participate in the Grand Magic Festival so he can humiliate him there. Will accepts the challenge. The scene transitions to Colette and Will in the athlete waiting room at the Magic Capital Stadium. Mercedes gives a speech signaling the start of the Grand Magic Festival. The students discuss the upcoming Sky Race, and many believe that Lehana will win. Meanwhile, Mercedes and Iris talk about the scouts hidden among the audience. Iris leaves and informs Mercedes that she is closely watching a particular participant. Shortly after, Sion arrives at the waiting room where Colette had requested his presence to join her team. Upon arriving, Sion notices Will standing beside Colette, clearly not pleased. Colette reminds Sion that they need a team worth at least 21,000 credits to participate in the Crown Assault competition. As Julius and his group pass by, Will, Sion, and Colette explains to Sion that the relationship between Julius and Will is strained for certain reasons. After Mias and Edward give a few words, several elves use special magic to officially launch the Crown Assault competition. The elves create several areas that participants must cross. Mias explains the differences between each area and the obstacles participants must overcome to win. He highlights notable participants, including Will, who is ridiculed by the students for his involvement. The competition then begins. Julius and his team move towards the obstacles, which transform into golems. Will, Colette, and Sion charge toward the golems. Colette uses her magic to give Will a device called the Gauntlet, which Will uses to smash through the golems, surprising the audience. We get a brief flashback of Sion reflecting on his previous encounter with Will during the Frost Creature incident. Returning to the Crown Assault competition, Will and his teammates continue to overcome the obstacles in the wasteland area. Some people commend Will's performance, while others believe Colette's magic is the reason for his success. Meanwhile, Mias informs everyone that some of the other teams are not faring well in the event. Will and his team eventually reach the final area, where Edward has set up traps. Will and his team manage to overcome the obstacles. Internally, Will reflects on his plan to execute a surprise attack when they approach the crown, the object required to win the competition. He knows things will escalate as they near the goal, and plans a countermeasure to thwart Julius's efforts. Unfortunately, Julius attacks Will, but Will manages to avoid getting hurt. The two engage in battle, but Sion intervenes, using fire magic to stop the fight. Sion tells Julius to leave the area. Colette notices that Sion had intended to target both Will and Julius with his attack. Julius retaliates by attacking Colette with ice magic, and Sion takes the opportunity to attack Will. Will loses both his weapon and his sword, and Sion demands that Will pick up his sword and fight him. Sion addressing the audience, expressing his negative feelings towards Will. He describes Will as weak, and admits that he has always despised him for refusing to become his subordinate in the past, which fueled his hatred. Back in the present, the fight between Sion and Will continues. In the Magic Capital, Mias updates the audience about strange developments within Will's team, specifically their internal conflict. Edward chimes in, pointing out that the Tower Scouts at the Grand Magic Festival would disapprove of Will's team's infighting. Meanwhile, Rusty and Kiki grow concerned for Will. Iris arrives and sits beside them, stating that she's rooting for Will after hearing about him from someone. Rusty is shocked to see Will's rising popularity. Colette tries to return to Will's side, but Julius blocks her path, and the two engage in a battle. Suddenly, it is revealed that Julius has been cloning himself throughout the competition, with his duplicates scattered across various fields in the Crown Assault contest. Wignall confronts one of these clones and successfully defeats it, obtaining an ice shard left behind. As the fight between Scion and Will rages on, flashbacks show Will's past struggles and bullying by his classmates. In these scenes, Will admits that he knows he's a failure and doesn't seek acceptance from others. He just wants to be left alone. In the next moment, the battle resumes with Scion summoning a fiery falcon to attack Will. Will plans to counter the falcon and press his assault on Scion. Successfully defending himself, Will's skill impresses the audience, though Scion's magical abilities are also drawing attention. During the fight, the two argue, with Scion expressing his disdain for Will because he believes Will gives everyone attention except for him. Despite this, Will puts up a real fight against Scion. He manages to defeat Scion's Fire Falcon and attempts to land a decisive blow, but Colette intervenes, stopping the battle between them. She informs Will that she has defeated Julius, but he vanished afterward. Colette scolds Scion after he comments on her torn appearance. Will offers Colette his coat, retrieves his sword, and leaves the area, promising Scion that they will face each other again in a real battle someday. Julius and his team reach the crown, but just before he can claim it, Will arrives and challenges him to a fight. The scene shifts to a meeting between Sarisa and Elvaria, where Sarisa slaps Elvaria on the head, reminding her to take her role as a Magia Vander more seriously. Sarisa places a document in front of Elvaria, informing her that it contains the names of candidates whom the Scouts want Elvaria to choose from to lead the Ice faction, with Julius being the top candidate. Sarisa believes that Julius may one day become Elvaria's successor, and Elvaria does not oppose this view. The scene then returns to the battlefield, where Will and Julius face off in a fierce confrontation. Both are determined not to lose, and they engage in a brutal fight. However, Will struggles to keep up with Julius and his party, discovering that Julius is using 4 ice clones to fight him. One of these clones explodes, trapping Will in an icy prison. Meanwhile, Werkner, Edward, and others realize that Julius has learned one of the most powerful spells from Elvaria's 12. Julius explains to the audience how he naturally learned this spell and plans to reveal Elvaria to the world. But in the end, Will manages to free himself from the ice prison and resumes the battle against Julius. Julius traps Will in another icy prison and summons a giant ice shard to attack him. Julius boasts to the audience, who praise his abilities. However, Will breaks free once again, quickly defeating Julius's companions, causing the ice clones to collapse. In another scene, we return to Elvaria and Sarisa. While Elvaria does not deny Julius's abilities, she hints that she would rather have a lone sword by her side, implying Will. At the same time, Will continues to break Julius's pride. Furious, Julius summons more clones to attack Will, but he knows he cannot control more than 4 at a time without his friend's support. However, he admits that Will cannot tell the real Julius apart from the fake ones. Will then strikes the real Julius and explains how he was able to figure it out. Will tells Julius that he grew up with Elvaria, which allowed him to understand her magic over time. Enraged, Julius tries to summon even more clones, but Will defeats them all and finally brings Julius down. At that moment, Wignall and his party arrive at the Crown Assault competition site. Wignall takes the crown and wears it. Elvaria speaks with Sarisa and asks if there are any spells that can change the past or erase memories. Sarisa responds that there are no such spells. Elvaria expresses concern that Will might think she was tormenting him with her clones in the past. Colette then approaches Will after the battle is over, and Will apologizes to her for failing to seize the crown. However, he raises his fist in the air, expressing his happiness at having kept his promise. Donan and his dwarf friends congratulate Will, Colette, and the rest of their team for their performance in the Great Magic Festival. However, Colette reminds Donan that their team didn't win, and none of them were scouted. Colette blames Sion for ruining their chances of victory. Donan sympathizes with her feelings, but expresses happiness that Will defeated Julius. Afterward, the scene shifts to Julius, who is working for Gina as punishment for losing to Will. The dwarves have forced him into manual labor, and Julius feels humiliated as he runs back and forth in the workshop. Meanwhile, Colette confronts Werkner about Will's future. She wonders whether people will treat Will differently after the competition. Werkner reassures her that they will. Later, many students approach Will, asking him to join their teams for an upcoming event called Praxis. This event involves students exploring a dungeon for a week. Colette intervenes and insists that Will shouldn't join any teams after the harsh treatment he received from many people before the Great Magic Festival. However, Will disagrees, appreciating the love and attention he's receiving now. Colette interrupts again, telling everyone that she and Will already have plans for the next day. Rose and Colette then discuss the date Colette is excited about with Will. Meanwhile, Rusty asks Will if he's planning to visit the dungeon tomorrow, since they don't have school. Will explains that he and Colette plan to go shopping, as he wants to buy some equipment. Will later meets Colette and compliments her on her outfit. Rusty arrives, introducing himself to Colette. The argument between Colette and Rusty halts when Lihana arrives and asks Will to accompany her somewhere. They reach a tea room where Wignor, Julius and Sion are waiting. Lihana asks Will to join their team for the Praxis event. Lihana defends her request, supported by Wignor. Although the Lightning faction reached out to her after the festival, Lihana feels she is still looked down upon. Lihana shares the story of her short-lived family lineage and their need to achieve rapid accomplishments. She also expresses her desire to become a Magia Vander. After hearing her out, Will, Sion, Julius and Wignor agree to join her team for the Praxis event. The story then shifts to Werkner, who lectures his students about the event, which will take place in 10 days. He explains that the 7th to 10th levels of the dungeon will be opened, allowing students to fight monsters and earn many points. Edward warns the students that some of them may face death during the event. Time passes, and Will and his comrades arrive at the Praxis event. Colette confirms that she will be participating in the event, as she wants to stay close to Will. Rusty runs into Will and Colette, informing them that he won't be able to participate in the event. Will understands and thanks Rusty for providing him with magical items. Edward gives the students one final lecture about the event before announcing its start. The episode ends with a mysterious scene of two men killing someone in an unknown location. A character named Logwell informs Carriot that the annual Praxis event for students will be held this year. Carriot responds that he doesn't want to represent all the factions known as Wands in this world. Logwell starts to criticize the Lightning, Elves, and Ice factions, arguing that the Incendia faction, the Wand of the Flame Emperor, is the most suitable to represent everyone. Back at the Praxis event, one of the supervisors informs the participating students that the event has officially begun. Lihana, Will, and their team arrive at a specific area where they encounter a group of crimson ants. Before Will can move, Lihana rushes into battle and starts fighting the ants. Wignall tells Will that Lihana comes from a rare lineage and is a skilled close combat mage. Lihana quickly defeats the ants and tells the team that she wants to reach the Praxis' final destination as soon as possible. Next, there's a flashback where Werkner tells Will that search magic is the best. During the event, Will realizes why when Julius quickly defeats an enemy in front of him. Will becomes anxious, worrying that everyone will defeat the monsters before he has a chance to prove himself. Wignall questions Will's usefulness, but Lihana argues that Will be capable of defeating monsters from the 5th level and above. However, even Lihana has doubts about Will's abilities. Will begins to doubt himself as the team continues to explore new locations and defeat monsters. Eventually, the team reaches a rocky area where Wignall uses a fire illusion spell to protect them from danger. Lihanna asks Will to distribute food to everyone. Wignall refuses to let Will touch the food, not considering him worthy. Will places Wignall's meal on the ground, which angers Colette because of Wignall's lack of trust in Will. Will advises Colette not to pursue the argument and reflects on how skilled the elves are in this world, mentioning the Elven Queen as a prime example. Lihanna tells her teammates that they should first defeat the luminous Nibiris and then deal with the remaining monsters. The scene shifts to the two mysterious figures from the previous episode, one whose name is unknown, while the other is believed to be called Headless. They are seen killing some monsters and participants, mockingly talking about their actions and laughing. Back with the main team, they reach the 10th floor of the Praxis event site. Julius wonders how another team arrived there first, despite them taking a shortcut. The team then discovers that the Nubrous monster has already been killed. In another flashback, Werkner explains to Will the limitations of search magic, detailing how both mages and monsters can evade it and what it cannot detect. Suddenly, a giant monster attacks Wignall, causing him and the rest of the team to fall to the 11th floor, splitting them into groups of 2. Julius and Sion note that only high-level mages are supposed to enter this floor. Meanwhile, Colette rushes to Lihanna, who was injured during the fall, but Lihanna reassures her that she will be fine and that they need to regroup with the others. We then see a flashback where several elves, including Elven Queen Eleanor, mock a young Wignall for his poor illusion magic skills. In the present, Will wants to help Wignall, but Wignall refuses assistance and asks only for medical supplies. Will and Wignall continue exploring the 11th floor, and Will explains why Wignall shouldn't use search magic, outlining a plan. A group of pig-like monsters called Gergeser appears, and Wignall struggles to fight one of them, prompting Will to step in and defeat it. Will explains to Wignall why illusion magic is ineffective against Gergeser and encourages him, Wignall admitting that he isn't as skilled as others think he is. See a flashback of Wignall casting spells in an unspecified location, calling out the name Eleanor. Then, we return to the present timeline with Will and Wignall. Wignall mentions that all the elves have ascended the tower beside him. He admits that his illusion magic lacks real substance and is mostly for show. Despite being considered one of the top 3 students, he sees himself as inferior. Meanwhile, Lihanna discusses this with Colette, saying that the other 2 students and herself don't hold a high status outside their academy. Wignall tells Will that he grew up alongside Eleanor and had deep feelings for her. However, he sees Eleanor as an extraordinary mage who advanced in ranks faster than he expected. Wignall trained hard to reach Eleanor's level, but he admits that his efforts were in vain. Will reassures Wignall, telling him that they aren't so different, and promises to protect him until he becomes strong enough to handle things on his own. As they continue forward, Will and Wignall defeat numerous monsters. Wignall wonders why Will hasn't given up on him like others have. Will responds that he knows Wignall isn't a bad elf. Kiki senses the presence of a monster in the area, but Wignall is unable to track it with his search magic. Will argues that the dungeon spawns new monsters, including fire creatures called Bolkars, which are known for their resistance to magic. Will explains that elven illusion magic works against them and hopes Wignall can support him. Wignall urges Will to abandon the idea, but Will offers encouraging words. Wignall reflects on Will's words, feeling that despite their similar dreams, they are different in other ways. Wignall tries to help Will, but the Balkers overpower his illusion magic. Kiki supports Will, and Will encourages Wignall to try again. Wignall thinks about everything Will has done for him so far and uses his magic to defeat the Balkars. Wignall bows to Will and tells him he has earned his respect. Both mages shake hands and continue their exploration. Will pulls out Rosty's Seeker map and explains how it, along with Kiki's strong sense of smell, will help them find the others, especially Colette and Lihanna. The scene then shifts to Julius and Sion, who are arguing over resources. Sion pulls Julius aside because he senses monsters nearby. A group of evil sentinels appears, and Sion plans to face them. Meanwhile, Edward protects some students from the evil sentinels that have reached his floor. He orders everyone to evacuate to the 6th floor of the dungeon. Werkner arrives aboard a sky racer to pick up Edward and informs him about Kiki and his desire to find Lihanna's group. Will and Wignall find Sion and Julius, and it's revealed that Sion and Julius had already defeated the evil sentinels. They inform Wignall and Will that they haven't found Colette or Lihanna yet. The scene then shifts to Lihanna and Colette, where Headless and his companion Marza appear before the two girls. Headless tells them that they plan to destroy the Great Barrier. Before Headless can attack the girls, Will and his group arrive. Will explains how they tracked them down. Headless attacks Will, but Marceau pulls him back from the battle, insisting that they focus on their primary mission. Headless then summons a monster called Duke using a teleportation spell. The narrator explains the 1000th rule regarding points, a system that determines success in certain challenges. The scene then shifts to Will and his friends as they fight the evil Grand Duke, Duke. The group steps back from Duke to strategize. Next, we see Will and Sion observing a group of monsters while perched on a cliff. Moments later, Julius and Colette join them. The four of them discuss the monsters that are following Duke's orders. Will suggests they need to defeat Duke first, arguing that once he's defeated, the other monsters will surrender, allowing Werkner, Edward, and others from the Academy to help them as well. Everyone agrees with Will's plan and leadership, except for Julius. Will approaches Julius and shares with him one of the secret techniques of Elfaria. Time passes, and we see Colette, Julius, and the others battling Duke. Julius uses the Elfaria's Ars Vice spell that will taught him to confront Duke. Everyone contributes to the fight with their spells. Lihanna tries to damage Duke with one of her spells, but Duke deflects it. Will and his companion Kiki intervene to assist Lihanna. Kiki tries to protect Will with a magical barrier, but Duke's new attack shatters both Kiki's barrier and Will's protective goggles. Meanwhile, Edward and Werkner continue roaming the dungeon, still searching for Will and his allies. Back in the fight, Lihanna and the others try to come up with a new strategy. Lihanna and Wignall plan to confront Duke with all their might, though Colette and the others are concerned about the risks. Wignall and Lihanna struggle to fend off Duke. Will feels discouraged after his Elfaria goggles were broken, and Sion confronts him about his change in attitude. Sion snaps Will out of his pessimism by punching him. Will thanks Sion for bringing him back to his senses, and then grabs his sword, preparing to fight again. Will jumps back into the battle against Duke. Colette expresses her admiration for Will's bravery and helps him in the fight. Sion joins the battle shortly after. Despite their incredible teamwork and power, Duke remains undefeated. A crystal drops in front of Will, triggering a flashback. In this memory scene, we see a woman, a child, and a figure wearing a cloak. The woman says, "One day, the wand and the sword shall meet." Back in the present, Will asks Sion to use fire magic on his sword. After Sion does so, Will uses the fire-infused sword to strike down Duke. The episode ends with Will looking at Duke with sharp, threatening eyes, signifying his victory. After Will defeats Duke, he sits down, exhausted, reflecting on how drained he feels. Wignall and the others watch from a distance, relieved that Will was able to defeat Duke. However, a new group of angry monsters appears in the battlefield. The heroes feel anxious since they've already used most of their strength fighting Duke. Nearby, Werkner and Edward realize they might not make it in time to save the group. Just as the monsters are about to attack Will and his friends, Aaron, the Light Sovereign's wand, arrives and uses a powerful extermination spell to defeat the monsters. Will recognizes Aaron as the Magia Vander and the strongest of the wands. Will also notices that Aaron and his allies are wearing dungeon gear, and he wonders if this is why they're here. Aaron tells everyone they did well, and Will's companions bow before Aaron. A boy named Finn then introduces himself to Will. Meanwhile, Headless and his partner are seen gathering a sword-like weapon. Headless is pleased they've completed their mission and expresses a desire to celebrate. The narrator then informs the audience that 11 faculty members lost their lives during the students' practical training event. No students died, and the narrator explains that some people wanted to gather information about Headless and his partner, but no clues were found about their whereabouts. At the same time, Colette and the others discuss the practical training event in the school's hospital area. Colette is saddened by the loss of life, but Lihanna steps in, expressing gratitude that no one from their team perished. She thanks everyone for their efforts during the event, specifically thanking Will, which irritates some people. Later, Cyan confronts Will about how he managed to infuse Cyan's fire magic into his sword. Others are curious as well, and Julius yells at Will for not using this trick earlier. Will isn't sure how he did it, so Colette suggests that he ask Werkner or other faculty members about it. Will brings up Finn's name and wonders if anyone can share more details about him. Both Wignall and Lihanna explain that Finn is a supporter and belongs to the Finn tribe. Lihanna adds that the Finn tribe consists of people without magic, but they possess extensive knowledge of the dungeon. Lihanna claims they are guides who help mages explore new areas of the dungeon. Will understands and takes a moment to reflect on his potential abilities and the Finn tribe. Later, Finn meets with Cauldron and presents him with a weapon called the Mage Slayer's Sword. Finn says he stole the weapon from a sinister group that had killed several mages. He argues that the Mage Slayer is not naturally made, suspecting that someone is conducting experiments in the dungeon. Finn tells Cauldron he needs to investigate and wants Cauldron to analyze the Mage Slayer. Finn angrily jumps onto Cauldron's desk, accusing him of not telling him about Will. Finn argues that Cauldron should focus on the wands, while Finn is responsible for monitoring the swords. Cauldron informs Finn that Will is aiming to become Magia Vander, and therefore is seeking a wand. Finn understands and agrees to leave Will under Cauldron's supervision, but says he'll check in on them periodically. Finn then leaves Cauldron's office. Meanwhile, Colette notices Will outside the school, training with his sword. She's puzzled and confronts Will about his current activities. Will argues that he has a goal he wants to achieve, so he must keep training. Lihanna and Wignall praise Will, while Julius contemplates what kind of person Will really is. Cyan suddenly jumps out of a window and challenges Will to a duel. Will accepts, and the two begin fighting. Afterward, we see Will, Cyan, and the others attending Werkner's class. Werkner mentions that it's been 2 months since the practical training event. He acknowledges the loss of many lives, but encourages his students not to grow complacent. Will reflects on his goals as Werkner hands out their graduation exam papers. Werkner announces that today is the first day of the exams. Will and his friends begin their exams, and the first season of Wistoria. Wand and Sword ends with Will mentioning the name Elfaria.